Welcome to Shadowproof. Evidence first, noise last.
In 1945, right after World War II ended, the US and the Soviet Union began a Cold War that lasted nearly 50 years. During this period, to demonstrate military strength, both superpowers competed to land on the moon. Strangely, the moon landing race ended immediately after one side had just landed. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the US began declassifying previously secret projects, and people suddenly woke up to discover that, after the moon race, the US and Soviet Union had engaged in even more unbelievable covert conflict. In the 1970s, the US was shocked to discover that the Soviet Union spent 60 million rubles annually, equivalent to $758.4 million United States dollars today, also known as the Sixth Sense, along with other superpowers like telepathy, clairvoyance, and clairaudience. The Soviet Union classifying these studies as top secret made the US value them even more. Therefore, in 1972, the US also poured money into extrasensory perception. They hadn't researched it before, but once they did, the US discovered that test participants could actually use psychic power, send their consciousness anywhere on Earth, then see and hear everything happening to the target, and could even leave Earth. This came to the attention of the CIA, who were very interested and also joined the research. While actively searching for suitable people to form a psychic team. Initially, the CIA wanted to use this team to spy on Soviet secret bases, but during the spying, one test participant was somehow accidentally drawn to a mountain range. The mountain range was in Alaska, in a very remote location with no structures, not even any people. The test participant felt this mountain range was unusual, so they went inside and unexpectedly discovered a massive base, containing many high-tech devices. The crucial point was that the owner of this base was not human. Therefore, the CIA invested more resources to actively investigate and discovered that everything was just beginning. Next, let's rewind more than 20 years earlier. That year, the CIA released a shocking declassified file. In 2000, under the Freedom of Information Act, they were forced to disclose Project Stargate. According to this declassified information, when the US learned the Soviet Union was researching extrasensory perception, they immediately established this project was primarily managed by the Stanford Research Institute. For precaution, they invited two scientists to direct the plan. They were Harold Puthoff, a pioneer in quantum mechanics, and Russell Tarr, a physicist. The first step of the plan was to prove humans have extrasensory perception. The simple method was to determine whether humans have superpowers. Therefore, they sought out artist Ingo Swann. This person had another identity, that of a psychic. It was said he had remote viewing ability, able to see things kilometers away. However, scientist Harold was skeptical, so they designed an experiment to test Swann. The experiment was very simple. Swann entered a sealed space with monitoring screens. There was a chair there for Swann to sit in. 4 meters above the chair was a board with 2 drawings. Swann had to make his consciousness leave his body, go above the board to see the images, then draw them. During this process, scientists connected a brainwave monitor to Swann's head to track his brainwaves in real time. After everything was ready, the experiment began. Just a few minutes later, Swann had drawn the 2 images. Although not 100% accurate, this result still shocked the scientists quite a bit. Therefore, they conducted several more experiments, and Swann consistently maintained over 65% accuracy. Not only that, scientists also discovered that whenever Swann remote viewed, his brainwaves fluctuated strongly. Later, to increase difficulty, they placed the sample images in an upstairs room, but Swann still drew them accurately. However, the scientists remained skeptical. They thought there might be flaws in the experiment. Therefore, they decided to increase the difficulty. They converted the image into coordinates, and placed them in an envelope. Not long after, Swann drew a small island. This amazed the research experts because Swann not only demonstrated the ability to see through envelopes, but could also use the coordinates in the envelope to remote view the exact target. A research staff member then had the idea to test how far Swann could remote view. And so they recorded the coordinates of the extraterrestrial planet. What was astonishing was that Swan answered correctly. Among countless experiments, Ingo Swan is most famous for predicting the existence of Jupiter's ring. At that time, many people didn't believe Jupiter had a ring. Some even thought Ingo Swan had created a big joke. It wasn't until 1979, when the Voyager 1 probe confirmed Jupiter indeed had a ring, that people realized Ingo Swan was right. The important point is, according to Ingo Swan's statement, advanced civilizations exist on Mars and the Moon. As for this part, we mentioned it before. Those interested can review it. Because in subsequent communications, the CIA not only confirmed there are ruins on the Moon and Mars, they even discovered that Earth seems to have been interfered with by someone. In 1973, the Stargate Project was being vigorously implemented. At this time, a retired employee named Pat Price caught the researchers' attention. It turned out that before retiring, this person had solved many cases relying on his sixth sense. And so the Stargate Project sought him out. Later, he and Swan became the most outstanding partners. On one occasion, the research center arranged for the two to be in the same room and gave them an envelope with coordinates written on it. After the two communicated, Pat said, "I saw two circular lawns connected together. On the lawn, there's a domed building with many antennas beside it. In the adjacent building, many staff are operating various sophisticated machines. There's also a secret room inside containing many files with very strange symbols. Shadow female, 14 shadows, 8 shadows." At that time, after hearing Pat's description, the research specialist was very because the coordinates in the envelope were actually that employee's own vacation home. But immediately after, Swan also described a similar scene, meaning both of them were wrong. That's not that they couldn't. This is very strange. And so the research specialist immediately began investigating, and they discovered, on a mountain a few miles from the vacation home, there's a large-scale listening post named Sugar Grove, with many radio telescopes. This listening post is owned by the National Security Agency, mainly used to intercept Soviet satellite signals, if one of the national security secrets. Clearly, at that time Swan and Pat might have been targeting this place. The important point is this experiment also shocked the CIA. Because the files the two saw and described were secrets within secrets. Only very few people knew about this secret. But Swan and others could rely on their communication ability to freely insert secret files in the base. Could they use communication to probe Soviet intelligence? A few days earlier, the CIA had obtained satellite images. They believed the Soviet Union was likely conducting nuclear tests. Therefore, in April 1974, under CIA instructions, Pat communicated with the Soviet Union for the first. Pat said, "I see several 3-story brick houses. The weather here is really warm. I really like the feeling of being immersed in the sunlight." Suddenly, the sound of moving machinery caught Pat's attention. He looked and saw a large crane. It moves on rails with 8 large wheels, each wheel up to 3 meters high. At this moment, the CIA investigator standing nearby nodded in satisfaction, because what Pat described matched the satellite images. So the investigator signaled, asking Pat to enter the adjacent building to see what's inside. Pat said, "This is a factory. People are using heavy metal pieces to assemble into a giant metal sphere 18 meters in diameter." But the project did not go smoothly. During the welding process, they encountered a problem where the metal sphere became deformed. Therefore, they are looking for a material that can withstand low temperature. Since Pat could not determine the function of the metal sphere, the matter was temporarily set aside. A few years later, the CIA obtained information about the factory and confirmed that there was indeed an 18-meter diameter nuclear containment device there. Due to a malfunction, the device could not operate normally. This confirmation made the CIA realize they did not overlook Pat's ability, so they decided to hire Pat to work at the CIA for more secret missions. According to the documents we have, in 1974, 1 year after police officer Dickie Husada, Pat Price joined the Stargate Project. He was officially hired by the CIA. This was probably the lowest cost espionage operation in CIA history. Although Pat's accuracy rate was not 100%, he still had a high success rate of up to 85%. Grasping the enemy's situation without being detected was a great advantage for the United States. However, 3 months after Pat joined the CIA, a strange incident occurred. During a mission involving remote viewing of the Soviet Union, Pat's consciousness was suddenly drawn toward Mount Hayes is located in eastern Alaska, Waukee, and is the highest peak in the lower Alaska region. Due to its geographical location and other factors, winter temperatures at Mount Hayes can drop to -20 degrees, so there is almost no human activity. But at this time, Pat could not move his consciousness away from Mount Hayes. So he allowed his consciousness to enter the mountain and immediately arrived at a vast space filled with machinery. These machines were very advanced, and beside them were beings operating them. Notably, these beings were very small, with slender limbs, but disproportionately large heads. Seeing this, Pat was very shocked because in 1975, people generally did not believe in aliens. What stunned Pat even more was that among the group of aliens, he also saw humans wearing military uniforms. More than half a month later, for personal reasons, Pat went to Las Vegas. In the lobby of the Stardust Hotel, he was unexpectedly bumped into by someone. At the time, he felt pain but didn't think much of it. Then the next day, July 14, 1975, Pat was found dead in the hotel. After a cursory 24-hour investigation, the police professionally concluded that the cause of Pat's death was heart disease. What's even more ridiculous is that Pat Price's death did not seem simple. Skip Yewater was once the director of the Monroe Institute. This is a non-profit organization researching supernatural fields such as human consciousness. Skip also once served as a guide for the Stargate Project, specializing in training potential intelligence personnel to become remote viewers. In 1975, 5 days after Pat's mysterious death, rapid knocking on the door woke Skip from deep sleep. "I wonder what other bastard it is." Skip angrily opened the door and saw Harold, one of the lead scientists of the Stargate Project. "You might be interested in this." As he spoke, he handed documents to Skip. According to Skip's account, when he looked through the documents, he was shocked to find that they were all reports of Pat's remote viewing while he was alive. And among them was Pat's discovery of traces of an alien base beneath Mount Hayes. It seems that at the time, Pat had secretly recorded his remote view and entrusted it to the scientist Harold for safekeeping. It appears that he seemed to feel he was not safe. Importantly, the area around Mount Hayes was not quiet either. In the video about the Hat Project we once shared, besides the famous Bermuda Triangle, there is another mysterious location called the Alaska Triangle. It is located in the northwestern corner of North. Over the past few decades, the number of people who have disappeared there has exceeded much higher than in other places in the United States. Even 2 planes went missing while flying over the Alaska Triangle airspace. At that time, the US mobilized a large force of personnel, but later, it didn't find even a single piece of aircraft wreckage. Not only is this a mysterious event, but this area also frequently has witnesses seen UFOs appearing in. Moreover, the alien base in Mount Hayes that they discovered is located right at the center of the Alaska Triangle. More importantly, according to Pat's records, besides Mount Hayes, he discovered 3 other alien bases, respectively at Mount Perdido in Tabanya, Mount Neonani in Zimbabwe, and Mount Rio in Australia. Because this matter is extremely important, and the accuracy rate in Pat's remote viewing ability, the 2 immediately reported to their superiors, and with the support of the US Army, they launched Project 8200. The purpose was to verify the alien base that Pat left behind before his death. However, what they didn't expect was this investigation would involve increasingly more terrifying secrets. But before hearing about those secrets, we need to learn about an important figure first. Joseph Marbonito was originally an extremely outstanding soldier, but due to being uninjured during an operation in Vietnam, he was assigned to participate in project and became a remote viewer. In 1979, the US discovered a building that unexpectedly appeared in Severodvinsk, in the Soviet Union's White Sea region, so they sent Joseph to use his remote viewing ability. After 20 minutes of silence, Joseph suddenly said, "This is a submarine manufacturing plant. I see a submarine that's about to be completed. It's very large, with a length of at least 170 meters or more. It's also equipped with many missile launch tubes." At that time, the CIA was very dissatisfied with Joseph because the width of the Ohio-class submarine being built at that time was only 13 meters. However, the Soviet submarine that Joseph described was 10 meters wider than the Ohio-class sub. The CIA didn't believe the Soviet Union had the technology to build such a large-scale submarine. Additionally, the manufacturing plant Joseph described was located far from the port location. Based on the latest satellite photos of that time, there was no canal between the plant and the port. In other words, even if the Soviet Union had the technology to build a giant submarine, they had no way to transport the submarine to the sea. Therefore, the CIA considered Joseph's remote viewing results unreliable. However, the following year, the CIA was the Soviet Union had indeed built the world's largest submarine, the Typhoon-class submarine, and even dug a canal for it. Without a doubt, this incident proved Joseph's remote viewing ability. Therefore, when the CIA decided to implement Project 8200, the first person they thought was in 1982, Joseph went to the library as scheduled. The library was the symbol of the Project Stargate that, at that time, helped Trey gave him a series of coordinates. And then Joseph began conducting remote viewing. Joseph said, "I saw a tall mountain." After seeing, Joseph drew the location of the mountain on paper. The mountain, but what? This seems to be a base here. Although the base is deep underground, the air is very fresh. I saw a dark-skinned man operating machinery. Below the base, there are many pipelines. Inside the pipes, there is a strange blue energy. The entire base has a crescent shape. On top, there is an energy transmission device. And this mountain is Mount Hayes. Next, Skip gave him the second coordinates, Mount Perdido. Joseph said the entrance to this mountain is blocked by a massive energy source. So he spent a lot of time getting inside the mountain. And there, he saw strange creatures again. The only difference is these creatures were all in containers. They seemed to be in hibernation. In one of the large spaces, Joseph also saw some aircraft and some advanced technology whose functions couldn't be described. The next reconnaissance target is Mount Niigani. This is a new base, still under construction. But surprisingly, the builders of this base aren't just aliens. Because Joseph also saw many military helicopters lifting huge containers to the base. This immediately brings to mind Mr. Pat's dealings. He also saw people in military uniforms. In other words, high-ranking military officials seem to know about the existence of these bases. That's certain that the CIA originally didn't. Because both Project Status and Project 8200 are directed by the CIA, if they had known earlier, why would they need to investigate? The final reconnaissance target is Mount Geo. This is a base with no one in sight. But at its bottom, there are many tubes filled with energy. Wait a minute, I understand now. Joseph suddenly said very excitedly. These bases are collecting some kind of energy from Earth. Do you know what kind of energy it is? I don't know, but I know besides Mount Niigani, the other bases have been around for a very long time. When humans were still in the primitive era, the bases were already there. Do you know where they're channeling the energy to? Skip continued asking. And after a moment of silence, Joseph finally spoke. They transfer the energy to a space platform. This space platform is similar to a human space station. At regular intervals, the space station concentrates the collected energy and transfers it to the deep regions of Mars. Time continues to stop in 1984. According to Joseph's account, when they heard that alien bases on Earth could transfer energy to Mars, the entire research team was extremely shocked, so Skip immediately gave an order, demanding Joseph to continue tracking where the energy was sent on Mars. Then surprisingly, he saw the receiving end on the other side was a pyramid. I must emphasize once again, although there were UFO sightings in the 1980s, the general social atmosphere at that time was disbelief in the existence of aliens, let alone Joseph seeing a pyramid on Mars. However, the truth is often hard, because Skip later actually found this pyramid. It was located next to a crater, thanks to the pyramid's shadow. CIA even calculated the pyramid's height to be 40,000 meters, equivalent to more than 2 Mount Everests stacked up. Notably, inside the pyramid, Joseph also saw aliens. But they looked different from Earthlings, they were very tall. Not only did Joseph see traces of civilization on wall, but according to another leaked document, many psychics in the Stargate Project had also seen them. Psychic BBT. The scene I saw does not belong to the natural geographical phenomena of this land. That object is extremely ancient. Psychic EBT, he saw a very tall building. Another psychic even directly said he had seen a pyramid. The pyramid was built for some reason. There are symbols on top, an entrance, and an open space. The overall color tends to be yellow, and is quite old. Following the passage inside, you first see a grand hall. Above the hall, there is another space, with a connecting passage in the middle. Below the pyramid, there are mysterious pipes, and also some strange machinery. This part is very similar to the description of the 4 bases. The dream also mentioned what psychic guy had. He saw many mysterious pipes, and also machinery whose purpose was unknown, because so many psychics saw the same scene. It made some people start to firmly in the existence of an alien base. However, there were also opponents who argued, we cannot believe it immediately just because many people saw it. After all, psychic abilities are not always 100. For example, although Ingalls successfully predicted the existence of Jupiter's rings, at the same time, he also said he saw high mountains on Jupiter. But Jupiter is a gas planet and cannot have mountains. But there were also people defending Swan, arguing that current humans don't think Jupiter can have mountains. But that doesn't necessarily mean Jupiter has no real mountain. It's possible that under the operation of some unknown mechanism of the universe, the gas planet could also form mountain-like structures. Simply put, this group of supporters believes that human technology is still not sufficient to ensure everything, because in one remote viewing session, Hart also was this, he saw a rectangular swimming pool measuring 60 by 80 feet. Alongside there was a concrete house and 2 waterfalls. After this incident, research staff confirmed, besides the 2 waterfalls there was no scene identical to what Hart had. At that time, everyone felt very strange. Why was there only an error with the waterfalls? And then in an old photo from over 100 years ago, they saw the missing waterfalls. The photo was taken in 1913, while the time when Mr. Parr did the remote viewing was 1974, by which time the waterfalls had already been. In other words, what Parr saw was an image from the past. The important thing is that this case of time transcending viewing is not the only one. There was even a remote viewer, Lynn Buchanan, who once revealed in an interview with reporter Elo Linda that he had once viewed the future in 2050. And exactly 5 years after this interview, the pandemic truly occurred. Some people also once asked Mr. Joseph, if remote viewing is real, then what is this? Joseph replied, he believed that the reason remote viewers is because in the universe there exists a mysterious, anomalous substance. It can record any event that occurs in time and space, since past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Therefore, through this anomalous substance, one can know anything they want. This concept somewhat resembles the economy. Although remote viewers often make errors, in history, there have also been many successful cases of remote viewing. For example, US President Jimmy Carter, through remote viewer Ramirez Smith, they successfully located a crashed Soviet reconnaissance plane in Africa. At that time, Ramirez Smith provided a set of coordinates. And then at these coordinates, they indeed found the wreckage of the reconnaissance plane. However, the strange thing is that alongside countless successful cases, in 1995, the US still, on the grounds that it had not achieved any significant results. Isn't that very strange? But even stranger is, in the declassified documents of 2000, the CIA changed its tune and admitted that, based on experimental results, they believe the ability of remote viewing is an innate, perhaps a type of residual self-defense of it, but mostly ignored by today's society. Yet through proper training, it can still be recovered. Look, the reason the Stargate Project is not because the project failed, but because the project had already succeeded. So, what do you all think? Do you think telepathy is a real innate talent? Have you ever heard of any cases with telepathy? Please feel free to comment and share. Thank you all for watching. If you like, you can subscribe to catch the next, or if you have time, you can watch more videos. See you all in the next videos.
If the proof convinced you, subscribe and open the next case.